Hi everyone, thank you for joining me for episode 37 of Friday Book Bites, and I am joined by Carly Anthony today. Hi Carly, all the way from Brisbane, is it?
Yes, Brisbane, yeah.
Excellent, thank you so much for joining me. Now, before we get into our chat today, I'm just going to pop up the details of the giveaway. And for anyone who leaves a comment or asks a question, either during this live stream now, or if you're watching this back at a later time, I'll keep the competition open until midday Saturday. You will go in the draw to win a copy of Carly's book, Off Limits to the Crown Prince, with a very luxurious, delicious looking cover there. Carly. So feel free to pop in any questions or any comments in the comment section there, and you'll go in the draw to win this beautiful book. Now, Carly, we're going to talk today about creating creative space in our lives. And we're going to talk about both the physical and the emotional space we need to create to write. And I thought we might start with the easier one, which I think is probably the physical side of it. What's helped you create that physical space in order to write and make your writing dream come true?
I just excuse the budgie in the background. Budgie keeping away, and she's out. I haven't been able to get her in the cage, so she might fly around as well. So if she lands on my head, we'll see. Look, I mean, the physical space for me, I'm really lucky now. We did a renovation of our house through lockdown last year, and I managed to get a writing room. It was our spare bedroom, and my eldest daughter was going to stay in there, but she's bought a dog now and she's moved out of home, so the room became spare, and I thought, that's mine. So it's quite easy for me to have a space now for myself, and I really do try to keep that space aggressively for writing. I have a day job. I'm a lawyer. I work from home, and I try not to take the computer into that room. I think I just want a space that is purely creative. I don't want the crossover at all, because a few of my friends who've beta read my books said, you sound like a lawyer. And sometimes I do in my stories. I have to really work that out of them. So I think I don't want that bleeding into that environment. But before then, I just had to I tried to find a space where I liked the view. Whether it was at the kitchen table, which the kitchen always seems to be the heart of our house. So I enjoyed writing there, or on our front deck, I'd sit out there in the sun and just, look over the garden and things like that. But just somewhere that felt like mine and felt that was comfortable and allowed me just a little bit of silence, which is hard to get when you've got a family of 5 people. So that was it.
A view is a really important thing, I think, regardless of whether you're lucky enough like yourself to have a room. And as you can see, I obviously have a writing room, dedicated to my writing as well. But even without that, just having something nice to look at helps open up the brain, I think.
Yeah, that's what I think too. It's very important to have something to look at other than a wall, just something. And in the room upstairs, I mean, I look out basically into the neighbour's yard and onto a road, but I've got lots of paintings there. My mum was an artist, so I've put a lot of her artworks up there as well, so I can sit and gaze at them if I don't want to just look into the neighbour's backyard. So that's all good. It's about creating somewhere that you feel comfortable in, without distractions. And I tried to also get away from things like anywhere where I could see laundry that needed folding, or any room that needed real tidying. I sort of made my space tidy, set it up, put my blinkers on, and just started writing, because it's very easy. The lure of laundry or cleaning the bathroom can be quite significant when you have got a book to write and no inspiration. So I was good at procrastinating it, cleaning things up or putting plates in the dishwasher. So I also try and just make sure there are no distractions where I am. try to leave the mobile phone away as well, you know, so I don't get on the internet, and just have a pretty clear physical space to work in.
Yeah, I was going to add that, you know, my house is never cleaner than when a deadline is looming.
Yep. Yep. Suddenly I become extremely motivated.
Yeah. I've got to clean those bathroom tiles.
Oh, yeah, I know. All that washing that needs to be done and folded and tidying and all that sort of thing. The house looks awesome, but, you know, I don't know if much writing gets done.
No. And apart from the you know, a room or a table or a deck to write on, the other thing that comes into the physical part of creating space, I think, is time. And it's something that I see a lot of aspiring writers struggle with. I don't have time to write.
Yes.
You know, you're a lawyer, so you're obviously a very busy person. You've got 5 people in your house.
Yes.
So how do we get around using time as an excuse?
Yeah, that was a hard one. When I was starting out writing, it was 9 years ago. I had young children, so finding time was the difficult thing for me. For various reasons, my husband was working quite late hours and my kids were going to bed early, so I tended to work from 8 o'clock when they went to bed till 10 o'clock at night, and I'd write then for 2 solid hours. But that changed when the kids' hours started changing as they got older, and my husband started getting home earlier. And look, I haven't really been a morning person, but I decided that I would get up at 4:45, 5 o'clock every morning. So that's what I did. I worked from 5 till 6:30 writing every morning. I try to do that on the weekends as well to keep in a bit of a routine. Yeah. And I thought, if I'm committed to my writing, I've just got to find the time to do it. So that's what I did. The other thing too was I stopped watching television. I found television, I'd sit down and just you know, watch a program, and I started writing instead. So people talk about what they watch on TV now, and I think I just don't watch it anymore, because I thought I've got choices to make, and if I'm committed to doing this, I need to find all the time that I can. So I don't watch TV much anymore either. It was just one of those things. The other thing I started doing, so I used to catch the train to work, but because of COVID, I started driving to work. That drive is about 45 minutes in traffic. So I downloaded a voice-to-text app on my phone, and so I just start dictating my story in the car on the way to work. So that's another way I get more words. Or I'd drop the kids off at tennis, I'd sit in the car dictating the story. You know, just snatching any moment you can. I saw heard a very interesting podcast. It was on Radio National. It was about a woman who timed her day in 6-minute increments. It's basically how lawyers bill, so I've never tried it. It seems like an anathema to me. I think, that's just like work. But she timed every moment of her day for a year to see where the time went, and she found she had more time than she thought she did. So I did that for about a week to see where I had more room. And I found I didn't, for example, spend as much time on my phone as I thought I did, but it was an interesting exercise to see where I was losing time. A lot of it was procrastination, basically. You know, when you're really busy and you kind of freeze and go, I don't know what to do, and you just stop. But I think the thing is you just have to make some time. It can be snatching 10 minutes here or there. Any words are words. So that's what I've started doing, apart from that block first thing in the morning. If I'm driving now, I tend to try to dictate my manuscript to get more words on the page.
I think that would be a really interesting exercise for anybody to do, whether you're a writer or not, to time your day and see where it goes. Because at the end of the day, we've all got 24 hours in a day, right?
Yeah.
Regardless of what you've got going on in your life. And it would be very interesting to see just how that time is spent. I love the word that you used then. You used it a couple of times just then, commitment.
Yeah.
And it's something that I see with a lot of aspiring writers when they go, I don't have the time to do it. If you are committed to it, you find the time. And I think that's, it's a really important element of, if you want to be a writer, committing yourself to that goal.
It is. It's really one of those things that you just have to make up your mind, and you have to do it. And look, I went through a phase before I was published, because it can be quite lonely writing. You write and you write and you write, and you're revising and editing, and it's without any feedback. In a day job, you get feedback about your performance. You really get none, unless, I suppose, you enter competitions or something similar, but or you get beta readers to look at your work. But really, from a professional perspective, before you're published, you get no feedback, and it can be very hard. And there came a time for me when things were extremely busy, and I thought, I've actually got to make a real choice now. Do I keep writing or do I stop? Mm-hmm. And this was before I was published, and I realised that writing was part of me. The voices were always there, the characters talking to me, that never stopped. So I thought, no, I'm all in for this. I'm all in. And that's why I sort of began then snatching, because I couldn't grab a couple of hours solid. I began snatching moments until I could get back to the stage again, where I had that physical time to be able to write again. I think it's all cyclical. You go through phases of not being able to write much or having plenty of time, but it really is something you've got to be motivated and quite self-directed in this, or else you'll get nowhere, really. And it is difficult. It's a difficult thing to do. It can be quite lonely some days.
And clearly, once somebody makes the decision to commit to their writing, it works, because you've had 3 books in, is it 18 months or 12 months?
Yes, so I published, the first one was published last year in June. So that was the second book I'd written. So I'd written quite a few books in the 9 years, but that was the first. But the rest, the second and third book, are all just, they're brand new. They're not ones that are sitting there already written. So I write a book every 6 months, and it's a huge shock to the system. I mean, 50,000 words is achievable. And apart from loving Harlequin Presents Mills and Boon Modern, I mean, I've always loved that line. That's where I aspired to be. That's where I wanted to be. I didn't, I've got many other ideas, but really that was my goal, and I decided to stick to that. So 50,000 words is achievable. But my first book the first book I ever wrote took 2 years to write it and edit it down. The book that was my first published book took 18 months. But a good friend who's a highly successful published author, Ali Blake, she had said to me, take the time before you're published to learn your craft, to write the books, because once you get published and you're on deadline, you have no time. And I think my husband was a bit frustrated. He read my very first book and said, it's awesome, you should just put it in now. I went, no, it's not quite right. And so I'm really happy that I took that time to learn. But now I've said to my publisher, I can do a book every 6 months. And so I just have to do, I've just signed a 4-book deal, and I have to produce a book. That was a bit of a thrill. I've had 2 book deals, and then suddenly they said, do you want 4? I went, oh, yes.
Sure, sign me up.
Ooh, that would be awesome. And I've got to produce every 6 months a book. It's got to be done. And ultimately you find you've got less than 6 months because one book bleeds into the other. So there's so much which you don't realise you have to do to get a book published that the times bleed into one another. So I generally have less than 6 months and you've just got to get it done.
Yeah. Anna, who is a bookshop owner down here in Sydney, has left a comment. Wow, from 2 years to one every 6 months. That's a big deal. Yeah, that's what it's like. We always say, you know, with hindsight, obviously, you're never more free as a writer, you know, except for that moment before you're published. You know, that's when you're the freest as a writer. Before we move on to the, sorry, go.
I was just going to say, in response to Anna's comment, the thing is about writing, though, you get better at it. So you begin you become a bit more intuitive about things. I think you get the beats and the routine a little better. You know what's achievable. Plus, the thing is too, if you're published, you have an editor. So I haven't availed myself of my editor yet, but there's a bit of a safety net there. I know she's available and she has said to me, if you're stuck, I think she saw once a comment I wrote on social media and she emailed me and went, if you're stuck, get in touch. I went, no, it's fine. I was just having a whinge. But yeah, I think that's it too. Plus, time frames crystallize the mind. I think they do.
Yeah, nothing quite like that looming deadline, is there? With regard to your comment about we get better as we write more, Anna has said that my books do get better and better. And I think that's the same. It's with anything you do in life, isn't it? The more you do something, the better and more efficient you get.
They say 10,000 hours is what you need to become an expert. So,
Now, before we move on to the more difficult part of creating space, I'm just going to go through a couple of the comments here. Nicole would actually really love it if your budgie appeared and landed on you at some point.
She's in the background. She's green and very pretty.
And Joe has joined us from South Australia. No need to apologise for being late, Joe. That's absolutely fine. And Janet has joined us from Coffs Harbour as well. So we've talked about the physical and the side of it and time, but there's also another element, particularly with anything creative, I think, and that's the emotional space to do something creative. And particularly in these times that we've been going through for the last 18 months, it's a harder one to nail down. You know, with all the doom and gloom that's going on at the moment, how do we find that emotional space to let our creative juices flow?
It's really difficult. And I think if you are keeping attention to social media and reading what the writers are saying, we're all struggling, I think. I think part of writing romance is that the stories are inherently uplifting and they have a happy ending. So I think for me that helps because, you know, the ending's going to be happy. I think one important thing is, and I've learned, you've got to be gentle on yourself. So sometimes you really have to stop writing, as hard as that can be. You really have to stop and take a break. It doesn't have to be for long, but you need to recharge your batteries. So I mean, it's difficult for me. I've had a number of times where, you know, it feels like writer's block. I know a lot of people say writer's block doesn't exist, but I think it's just more a block to any sense of creativity. So sometimes I just write on through. I write complete and utter rubbish because sometimes you have to write your way into things. So that's one technique if you don't feel creative at all, just to write your way into anything. I've found sometimes I write something different. I write poetry. I started writing that was really how I first started writing, I think, writing poetry, and then I knew I wanted to start writing books, writing or reading poetry, because it's short and snappy. I think that can help engage your emotional brain a bit. I sometimes find just reading authors I love or rereading stories I particularly love gets you to connect. I think it's a matter of connecting with that emotional side. But it is very difficult because, you know, they do say, studies have shown that women carry the emotional load of household, that mental load of everything that you've got to do, whether it's your writing or you've got to take your kids to this and that, or I don't know, you know, pay the bills. There's just so much that you have to do day to day. That trying to remember it all and fit it all in can feel quite overwhelming. So I think it's important, if you find yourself in that situation, to make just a tiny bit of me time. I find for me, getting out into nature is extremely helpful. And I realised that I was having a pretty awful time writing, and my husband took me up to the Bunya Mountains. It was my birthday, and there's some mountains about 3 hours outside Brisbane. It's in the middle of a national park. We stayed in a beautiful little house. You're surrounded by rainforest and birds. And I just sat on a front deck, and parrots would come and sit in front of me and be walking all over the table as I was trying to write. And we'd bushwalk. And it was just getting away into nature that just started everything. Ideas just came again. So often I find if I get stuck, I go for a walk, which is hard now, but luckily we can still exercise. So we've got a park. I've got a park down the road. I can go for a walk in the park. I also like gardening too. So getting into the garden and picking flowers, I think for me, nature is a huge part of creativity. So it's just getting out of the house and what is oppressing you and all the things you have to do, and just moving away from it for a while.
Can be helpful. Even in lockdown, you know, what I often used to do before I was in lockdown, you know, if I found myself getting stuck at the desk here, I'd go to a cafe, you know, and I'd people watch and take my either laptop or notepad with me. And obviously I can't do that during lockdown. But even just going into the backyard is something changing. That I can do. Pat the dog, you know, like.
I think too, if you're feeling a bit oppressed with all those things you have to do, another thing I've found is just keeping very good lists of things you have to do. I'm notoriously bad at keeping a list. I tend to keep everything in my head. So I now utilise my work tasks, because work has said we don't care if you put personal stuff in there, which is quite good. So I utilise that now to schedule not only my personal but my work tasks. And because I'm on my work computer every day, I can see everything down the side of my email. It's actually been quite life-changing. It completely frees my brain. If I have any thought, it just goes into tasks now, and it can remind me. So I think it's freeing your mind of anything that's stuck in there, that's holding you back. You know, you got a thought, write it down, keep a list, get it out of your head, and put it somewhere else, so you've got some time and emotional reserves to write.
I find to-do lists very helpful, not looking at them because that stresses me out, but writing them. Because, you know, sometimes, you know, before I go to bed and I'm thinking, oh my God, I've still got to do this and I've got to do that and I've got to get the daughter's medicine and and I can't go to sleep. Whereas if I write it down, that does free that, because I know it's there in the morning that I can.
Yeah, you know, you're not going to forget it.
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Rosemary has joined us and she says she loves that you find your creativity in nature. And I think a lot of creatives, whether it's writers or musicians or painters, would also find that. And there's a lovely comment here from Janet that says, we ordinary folk get our relief from the daily grind, reading what you great folks write. Thank you, Janet. That's really lovely.
There's a reason I just read romance, you know. Yeah, it's just a joy. There are so many. Life is so real, you know, and especially now, I think there's so much reality in life that I really just want to read happy endings. I made that decision around the time I started writing. My mother passed away. She was the one who encouraged me to write again. She sort of grabbed me by the shoulders and said, you need to write. And I started the next day again. And I just thought, you know, I don't want to. I was never a kid who liked reading stories with sad endings. I always used to flick to the end of the book first to read the ending to make sure it was happy. And then when that happened, when Mum passed away, I thought, you know, I just don't want to read another sad ending. So I didn't, apart from in book group. And then, you know, our book group sort of drifted away after 20 years. And I thought, I'm happy to just immerse myself in happy stories. It's changed my life, I think, writing them and reading them all the time. It's great.
Now, as a romance writer, and you mentioned this a little bit earlier, that, you know, it is inherently a happy story, a romance.
Yeah.
You know, there might be some trouble on the way to the happy ending, but it is inherently a happy, uplifting experience. Have you found that, you know, the state of the world at the moment and with lockdowns and the worry, that it's easier to lose yourself in those stories as a writer, or is it harder to, you know, do you find it easy to block out what's happening in the world and go into that romance world?
I'm finding it harder simply because the type of stories I write are of their nature. The Harlequin Presents line is that sort of billionaires and high kind of fantasy sort of romance. And even when I'm reading some stories, when someone's hopping in a plane and just flying somewhere, and I get this tremendous sense of anxiety because I think we can't just hop in a plane and fly anywhere. So there are some things that really do cause me to pause. Interestingly enough, the book I've just handed in, it was a story of a couple who are snowbound. And I think that choice where two people are locked in, they're locked in an awesome castle, but they're locked in a castle and can't go anywhere, and they're just stuck together. I really think that idea came from being in lockdown and just not being able to go anywhere, and that people being forced together. It's quite interesting. So I'd be interested to see how that's received, because it's two people stuck in a nice location. But that's what I found. I think our worlds are getting smaller and smaller, and that's what I've found. My stories seem to be compressing to feel a bit smaller and closer. So I need to expand again, but it is difficult. It is difficult to do because of everything that's going on. I think my black moments might be a bit blacker at the moment right now.
It is, because real life does seep into our writing.
It does.
I know last year when I was writing, you know, when the pandemic first hit, and I handed, you know, the draft into my publisher, and she was like, "Oh, it's a bit heavy for your style of writing, Sandy. What's going on?" And I think it was just all of that external stuff bleeding into it, and I had to find a way to find the happiness back in the story.
Well, the book, as I said, that I've handed in, it's got a really dark kind of gothic feel, and my editor said, I just love that whole gothic kind of vibe. And I thought, it's not my stories, although they, you know, Harlequin Presents is that quite emotional, almost high drama line. there's a lot of humor in my books because I can't get away without my characters doing things that are, it's just the way I write, you know, it's my voice. I can't do something that's too heavy, but this one's quite, this one's quite solid. It's quite a solid story. So it'll be interesting to see what people think of it, because it is fairly different to what I normally write. But anyway, the editor likes it, so that's the main thing, I suppose, for now.
I'm sure the readers will too. Rosemary's left a comment that she doesn't like sad endings either, because they leave her feeling down. And that's one of the beauties of romance stories, isn't it? That you know, even if there is trouble along the way, you know you're going to get that happy end.
Yeah.
And Jo has said that she's very grateful to have her writing and her reading during these times as a getaway from it all. Now, speaking of real life bleeding into our writing, in your latest novel, which is the one up for grabs today, Off Limits to the Crown Prince, your heroine Hannah is an artist.
Yes.
And I've noticed that you also are a bit of an artist, that you like to play around with that. How much of yourself do you infuse into your characters?
Look, I think there is always a part of you. Well, for me, I think there's a little bit of me in most characters. They're quite different to me. I think essentially I'm writing the woman I wish I'd kind of been at their age. I tend to be quite shy in real life and a bit of an introvert. Funnily enough, I think a lot of authors are. I think you essentially need to be an introvert to do this job. And, you know, many times when I was a bit younger, I didn't speak up as much. And so I think I write the women I wish I was back then. I mean, now I'm very different, but I write my female characters to speak up. So, but I think there is a little bit of me in all of them. And I've got some very good friends who've read my book and they read them and say, "Oh my goodness, I can just hear you. I can hear you talking this book to me." So they say I'm in the books as well. So it sounds egotistical, but I think you can't. It's not really. I think your lived experience is what drives your stories. So I think there's a little bit of the author in most books they write somehow, somewhere.
I would agree with that completely. Now, Sue's left a rather philosophical comment here, which I think is beautiful and sums up the whole reading and writing experience perfectly. Sometimes dark often leads us, the readers, out of what we perceive to be dark, then the happy ending lifts us. And I think that's a really beautiful way of looking at it.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah, that's beautiful.
Now, I think we need to quote that, Sue. We might put that on a meme.
That's beautiful. That's fabulous. That's great.
Oh, dear. Now, I'm just going to pop up the details of where you can find Carly online. So if anyone has any last-minute questions for Carly, pop them into the comments now. These are Carly's books and her Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and her website. Carly, what is next for you?
Oh boy!
Other than the Snowbound story, when can we expect the Snowbound story?
So that will be out in January. And I actually truly love that story. I have had a lot of trouble giving those characters away. I was so excited for my revisions because I got to work with them again. I just love them anyway. So I've now got 4 books, a 4-book deal. So the next book I'm looking at is one that I had written before I was published, and it's really, there are 3 books with intersecting characters, each one standalone. So that'll be quite interesting and complicated to keep a thread going through the books, but making the books all standalone. So that'll be the next 3 books. And then the 4th, I have no idea what I'm going to do for that. I think for me, ideas rattle around in my head and then one snags, and that's the one I grab onto. Characters won't leave me alone. They're the ones that shout the loudest. So, yes, that's what I'm going to be doing. So it'll be a busy time, I think.
Busy. Yeah. And Sue has said we can steal her quote, so that's great. Thank you so much.
Good, that's beautiful.
That we'll start seeing that around social media soon.
Yeah. You should put that up somewhere. It's awesome. If you're on Twitter, I'll retweet it.
Before I let you go, Carly, and thank you so much for joining me today, I wanted to ask you, there's a quote on your website that says, "Too many happy endings are never enough," which I think is also a really beautiful quote, and particularly in the times that we're living in right now. I think we all could do with a happy ending right now. Do you have a favourite romance trope that you like to write, and is that different to your favourite one to read?
My favourite romance trope to read is Friends to Lovers, because that is my husband and I. My husband and I were friends at university, only friends, in a group of friends who were still friendly. And it was 20 years into our friendship that we discovered, I was friends with a bunch of guys, and so I'd go out drinking with them and watching footy. And it was only when my husband and we were single at the same time in the same city, and we started hanging out and talking about things other than beer and footy, that we both realised, oh my goodness, we have the same ideas about everything. And then we both were out drinking one night and he kissed me, and I thought, I'm going to marry you, and we did. So Friends to Lovers is very close to my heart. Books I like to write. I do like an enemies to lovers story, because I really like that high sort of that conflict and that tension of, I hate you, but I love you, but I hate you. Those very strong emotions. I like stories with very, very strong emotions. Those sorts of stories for me are really enjoyable to write. I do like that. So I must write a Friends to Lovers story one day, though, but I haven't quite figured how I can fit one into the Harlequin Presents line, because it tends to be more the enemies to lovers sort of story. So, so we'll see.
Rosemary loves the story about you and your husband.
Oh, it's an awesome story. If someone had said to me when I was at uni that you and Phil are going to end up married, I would have told them they would just had rocks in their head. I honestly, and then after years I went, why didn't we do this years ago? But anyway, we didn't. So
because the timing wasn't right. So
the timing was not right. The timing was not right at all. So yeah, and I think I grew up and I've been looking in all the wrong places, and the man was straight in front of me. Yeah.
And we've got a soulmate here. Darlene says that her hubby is the boy next door.
Beautiful. That's
I like those stories too.
Yeah, that's gorgeous.
I didn't have any boys next door, so
I've still got a friend, and he and I at 5 said we'd marry each other. So he was the boy next door, but we didn't, but we're still friendly. Yeah, so many years, many years ago. So, yeah, we're still friends, but no, we didn't get married, but he's still a buddy. So
Nice. All right, I'll just pop up the details of where you can find Carly again in case you missed it earlier. Thank you so much for joining me today, Carly, and I look forward to the snow story that's coming out in January. It sounds like a ripper. And guys, check out Carly's books, particularly if you want a happy ending, which, as I said, I think we all need right now.
Yep.
Thank you so much. Leanne has also dropped in to say that she's loved learning more about you, Carly, and thank you. All right, guys. If you are in lockdown, if you're not in lockdown, wherever you are watching this from, please stay safe, take care of yourselves and take care of each other. And hopefully we can get through these times in the not too distant future. Take care, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.